Long coalition negotiations aren't anything new when it comes to European countries, but the Netherlands have been pushing what it means to have a long negotiation period. After 271 days, the longest coalition negotiations on record, a deal was finally agreed on Monday for the Netherlands' next government, a government that looks basically exactly the same as the one it's replacing. So let's explain what happened and what's actually changing right now. By the way, before we start, if you want more like this, then you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram for graphics and explainers which never make it to YouTube. They're linked below and we'd love your support. So, the coalition. It's probably best to have a quick recap as to why the election happened back in March and what the results actually were. As with all good political stories, this starts with a scandal, and a big one at that. After Rutte and the VVD took office back in 2010, the government began tightening up the laws around benefit fraud, with the Dutch tax authority given an increased mandate and increased power to hunt down cheats. So far, so good. The issue being that very quickly stories began surfacing of excess moves by the authorities. Many families ultimately lost their homes as a result of being hit with fines and having their benefits stripped on the grounds of alleged fraud. Fraud that often doesn't actually happen. To add insult to injury, those with dual nationality were subject to additional scrutiny. When the scandal properly broke after the publication of the parliamentary report in 2020, all hell broke loose. The entire Dutch government promptly resigned en masse in a decision that Rutte stressed was unavoidable. With elections already scheduled for that March, the vast majority of the government remained in place in a caretaker capacity. So, what happened when the Dutch headed to the polls? Well, in spite of the scandal, Mark Rutte's VVD saw their vote share stay relatively stable, coming out on top as the largest party with 21.9% of the vote. In second place were the Liberal pro-EU Democrat 66, or D66, surging from 12.2% in 2017 to 15%. In third, the Nationalist Party for Freedom, or PVV, on 10.8%, and in fourth, the Christian Democratic Appeal, or CDA, on just 9.5%. With the election results out, then came the hard bit, negotiating a coalition. Immediately after an election, each Dutch party appoints a scout, whose job it is to go out and test the waters for a coalition. Then, as the Dutch House of Representatives' own website states, no later than 1 week after the election, the House has a plenary debate on the election results and the cabinet formation procedure. In this debate, the House can designate one or more so-called informateurs, who examine which party are ready to form a coalition and any obstacles which have to be overcome. The informateur tends to transfer duties to the formateur, typically the person who is likely to become the Prime Minister. The formateur crosses the I's and dots the T's on the coalition, dividing up ministries between the relevant coalition parties. But enough about abstract details. Why has it taken so long to get to this stage of an agreed coalition? To put it bluntly, COVID. But not in the way you might first think. Immediately after the election took place, the Interior Minister from D66 and the VVD Senate leader were appointed scouts and began testing the waters for a new coalition. A little over a week later, the scouts met with the leaders of all parties in the Dutch Parliament. After learning that she'd tested positive for COVID, she rushed out of Parliament, inadvertently managing to leak coalition negotiation details whilst doing so. Specifically, she rushed out carrying sensitive documents which were very, very quickly photographed and analysed by the press. 4 words stood out. Peter Omtzigt, office elsewhere. While that initially might not seem like much, it managed to derail talks basically immediately. That's because it was Omtzigt who played a crucial role in bringing down Rutte in the first place, uncovering the child benefit scandal that precipitated the fall of the government back in January. Asked whether he discussed sidelining Omtzigt, Rutte initially denied ever discussing the issue, stating he had no active memory of it, something he later backtracked on after receiving a phone call. The Dutch Parliament promptly began considering a vote of no confidence in Rutte over his conduct, a vote he just narrowly managed to survive. The Parliament did, however, manage to pass a lesser motion of disapproval against him, a motion that was actually proposed by his closest allies and intended coalition partners. Anyway, that forced negotiations to go back to square one, and after a cycle of new scouts and new informateurs, in the autumn the parties finally began talking policy, with a coalition agreement finally being reached on Monday. Rutte's VVD, D66, CDA and Christian Union agreed on the text of a deal which will be put to Parliament on Wednesday. The deal sees free childcare extended, the investment of billions of euros to tackle climate change, and a housing shortage, as well as research into nuclear energy, according to broadcaster NOS. If you're getting a sense of déjà vu and think that the new coalition looks a bit familiar, that's because it is. The party composition of Rutte's fourth cabinet is set to look identical to his third. What has changed is the balance of power of the coalition. In Rutte's third cabinet, the VVD held 33 seats, the CDA 19, D66 also 19, and the CU on just 5. The proposed fourth sees the VVD on 34 seats, the CDA down 5 to 14, D66 up to 24, and the CU still on 5. i.e. the progressive D66 is now a much bigger relative countervailing force in Rutte's cabinet compared to that of the CDA. The D66's increased influence can be immediately seen in the final agreement published on Wednesday. The coalition have committed to the reintroduction of student grants, a €1 billion compensation package for students with loans, a €35 billion climate transition fund, a 7.5% increase in minimum wage, and an adjustment of the VAT system to encourage healthy food even further. On the EU front in particular, the coalition have pledged to push for the founding of an EU Security Council, as well as a return to healthy and prudent macroeconomic policy, i.e. getting debts and deficits under control. Given Merkel's departure from the political stage, this coalition ultimately means that Mark Rutte will solidify his position as one of the longest-serving heads of state on the European stage, in charge of one of the most influential member states outside of France and Germany, as well as one of the richest ones too. Having been appointed PM back in 2010, if he serves out his full term, Rutte would have led the Netherlands for 15 years. When it comes to current democratically elected European leaders, only Viktor Orban, who assumed office 5 months before Rutte, has served for longer. But what do you think? Was the election pointless? Will this new coalition be any different to the one it's replacing? As always, let us know your thoughts down below. Also, as always, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release a video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that's down below.